All right. And I'm going to drop that link in the general channel for everybody here in a sec. So let me see. All right, there's the video, or the link to the YouTube video in the text chat. So let me see. Yeah, so is there confusion about, so Seeds, Mr. Seeds said, some confusion about being in person today. I hope there's no confusion. Um, we're, we're, uh, we're still remote till we figure out whether Omicron is going to morph into Omega and kill everybody. So, but for anybody in the actual classroom, your fallback is to log into the podium, right? And if you need to use who's over there? Canute, um, William. Is anybody sitting in the classroom? Oh, cool. All right, Canute's an employee. Double Canute employees. Sweet. So you can track it there and are you on? So you guys on? Williams posted up in the hallway. Uh, so are you stream? I'm just out of curiosity, Canute. Are you streaming the YouTube thing into the classroom, or are you streaming like connected on Discord? Okay, so you got Discord and on the projector. Okay. All right, cool. Well, hey everybody. I hope everybody's. I know some of you have been down whacked with COVID bull crap, and welcome. I recognize at least a couple that have been down. So welcome back. Hope you're doing okay. Um, let me see. Yeah. So no, you can do whatever you want, whatever suits the class. YouTube's always going to have like a 5-10 second delay. There's always that lag, and you're going to have more immediately interactive on Discord if you got Discord up with the share. So up to you. Up to whoever's in the classroom to figure that part out. All right, and reminder: please jump over to attendance. And yeah, I actually caught up. Um, yeah, attendance is caught up. But yeah, jump over there if you haven't done it already, and mark the attendance channel. I want to just give you a reminder that if you are watching this thing on YouTube later and doing kind of a makeup, would you please indicate yourself? Uh, would you please indicate yourself in there's a text channel called YouTube class makeup. When you've done a makeup on YouTube, if you put your name in there, tell me what date, and I'll give it a thumbs up when I've recorded it, and that'll be a little more like I'm checking that regularly when I check the two classes that I've got. It's a little more reliable than DMing me directly because it serves specifically that purpose. Okay, so just as a reminder to everybody to please do that. Kevin, thank you. There is the fact that just FYI, Kevin, some of those names are screen names, not real names, and I don't have the mapping function, so that's a factor. Okay, let me see. What are we doing? I went back and double checked kind of where we were. Let me see. Seeds, Tyson asked, anyone else audio and video not in sync? Are we talking about YouTube now, or are we talking about the stream on Discord? What should I do? Um, I can kill the video screen, and if it's only a slight stagger, let's not worry about it. But otherwise, I can kill the video screen, the video share to Discord, and just redo it. Um, yeah, truly up to. I'm gonna do a quick. What should I do? I'm gonna unshare and then reshare and see if it syncs. This is just Discord only, still streaming to YouTube. And let me see. It's a slight multi-step process to sort of get this guy working right. I can also change the resolution and/or frame rate if that maybe is going to help. I'll drop the frame rate and I'll drop the resolution. Let me know if that's, you know, still okay. Um, yeah, Kevin. So no, the audio input is direct on the audio voice channel, and then the video is just streamed. So that may be, but I don't think it's usually noticeably out of sync. All right. So all I did was just slow down kill the resolution a little bit on the video feed into Discord. So that should be okay. Okay. So, all right. Just as a reminder, I'm going to go for mid-Feb is our reassessment point. Okay. So I want to go at least through, in my perfect world, I'd stay remote through the 16th. But I also may have a thing that I don't know. There may be a day or two where I've got a conflict coming up that I don't know yet. We'll play it by the ears. Okay, I wanted to say, since we're talking about design, I just felt like uh, the cat and the dogs meme. It has nothing to do with the quote below it, but the cat dog meme is just meant to be. I think it's good design. You know, it's that cat selfie. It looks like I don't know, like a Hootie and the Blowfish album cover, or um, I don't know, you know what I mean? It kind of has that, uh, I don't know, that it feels like an album cover of that sort of style. The other one is just mood of the day. Life is like a helicopter. I don't know how to operate a helicopter. Life is a lot like that. So get used to it. Okay, we're still rolling over here. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let me pull up where we were. I want to talk about we last time I blew past Calvin, right? Remember Calvin and Hobbes? And I kind of blew past it, and I wanted to just catch up, finish talking about the orders of ignorance, so that we've got a kind of a common point of reference, and then we'll get on to whatever comes next, which is probably UML and use case diagrams. Let me see. Where are we? I also tried, by the way, to go through and delete a bunch of crap and try to do my best to get the overhead as low as possible, which I need to just kill a couple more things. that. Okay. I'm just kicking in my slides here. Sorry, being slow. At least I don't have Teams up, which would probably be dead in the water. Yeah, let's talk about Calvin and Hobbes. Should be appearing here in a sec. Yeah, so I got a okay. So let's talk about the Calvinator. Yeah, so this is I grabbed this some long time back. Calvin and Hobbes goes a long time back. Watterson was an absolute genius. There's just no question. Just absolutely revolutionary. But especially just from a kind of a philosophical perspective. Um, so this is kind of about perspective. It's about the difficulty we have in being wrong. You know, we really struggle to just not be right. You know, and I think some of it's human nature, some of it's training, some of it's modeling. You know, I mean, some of us have whatever parents, grandparents. In my experience, there was a sort of a golden era that started with my grandparents and continued into my parents, which would, you know, I'm probably about the age of most of your parents. So that's, you know, we're generationally kind of trickling down. But I think it is about just sort of needing to be right, you know, having to be right and having a really, really difficult time being wrong. But here's the thing. One thing, I got to close my door. Hold on. But I got the headphones so you can still hear me. But one thing um, that's really, you know, critical to understand is that, and I'll just say this as kind of a premise or kind of a precursor, all learning happens on the frontier of ignorance. You think about that for just a second, it seems pretty obvious once you think about it. If you can't embrace ignorance, but when I say embrace ignorance, I don't mean, you know, get excited about being ignorant and staying ignorant. That's not embracing it. That's a form of embracing ignorance. That's not what I mean. I mean that you embrace the fact that when you're in a position where you're constantly learning, you are simultaneously in a constant state of ignorance with respect to the things that, you know, that are new to you, that are news. And if you get really, you know, kind of freaked out about just being wrong, you can't admit you're wrong. There's never an opening where the new information can come in, right? If you're always so, and there's kind of a paradox, which is the person, you take a group of people, random group of friends or whatever, and you know, you think about a random group of your friends and think about, you know, what think about the person in the group of friends, maybe roommates or family members, whatever your group might be, who is really comfortable just saying, "Well, what is that?" You know, just no shame, never ashamed to just not know something, right? Think about that person. Now think about the person that will never admit when they're wrong. And if something new kind of comes up, like a topic comes up and they don't know what it is, they'll be like, yeah, yeah, that's right, and they don't have any idea. And you kind of know, right? Think about these two people, right? They're just meant to be sort of extremes, right? You may have a group that, has a different demographic split. Okay. Also, try to be honest about whether you're one of those, where you are, and be honest. You don't have to admit it here, but be honest about it. But uh, the question becomes, um, if you needed to go ask a question of somebody that you believed would probably have the answer, would it be the person who never lets on that they're wrong, or would it be the person who regularly says, "I don't know"? Just what do you think? What do you think? What's your reaction to that idea? Comments, please, or you can unmute and just share. And I just want to say, and I don't know, uh, one of you can all see it as well, but one of you has both your mic muted and your audio muted, which means you're in the role, but either you're listening. I don't know if that's so. William, you tell me, if is that so. I'm not like paranoid. There we go. Is that because you're like listening on YouTube, muting the audio coming out of Discord? Is that kind of you know what I mean? It looks like, you know what I mean? Hey, I'm here, but I'm like muted on the conversation. I'm just curious. Okay. No, I'm not trying to pick on you. It was just, I looked down and I'm just like, oh, your audio is muted. Nice touch. Yeah, I can, William. Okay, yeah, no, not trying to pick on you. It was just more like, is that a legit config, or is somebody like, you know, I I show as present, but I'm really, muting the audio. No, that's cool. That's cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out. I mean, I guess I kind of did. I just didn't even mean to make a big deal out of it, but I was curious. So that's cool. Yeah. Okay. So back to the question. Uh, let me see. Um, yeah, you're gonna ask the I don't know guy. I mean, Jet said you to ask the I don't know guy. You get a real answer. Okay. Now Derek said, interestingly, maybe if I just needed factual info, I'd ask the one who seems to know a lot. But if I wanted to have a conversation, I'd ask the one who really admits to being wrong. No, that's a really good point, because you're going to have more of an interactive conversation in that kind of a setting, right? Um, okay, so Geek Muffin, I don't care whether you're on the voice channel, if you're in the class, if you're partaking and you can, add the chat, you know what I mean, that you can contribute via chat and mark the attendance. I don't care if you're, currently, showing there. Obviously, it's honor system when we're remote. It's honor system when we're there in person, other than the fact that you have to show up with a vital sign and you can still be zoned out thinking about whatever. You know what I mean? So, does that make sense? Um, Dallin said, if the know-it-all is just going to lie to me, what's the point of talking to them? Walter trusts the I don't know guy more, and I do too. I do too. And it turns out, let me see. Um, be worried about a lack of solution for the I don't know. But here's the thing. Okay, so Kevin just said I'd be more worried about a lack of a solution from the I don't know guy, though. Um, but here's the thing. The I don't know guy, in my experience, it's not like they never know anything. It's not like they're always I don't know. But the reality is that when you're in interesting company, learning interesting things, talking about interesting things that stretch you, you don't know all kinds of crap all the time. So if you're just open to learning, you say, I don't know, you're open to, like, I don't know what that is. What is that? Help me understand that. And it's only like middle school, junior high, where you learn to be shamed by that, where the kids would be like, you don't know the one thing, and then you memo to myself, never admit again that I don't know something, you know. And I think that's probably where we learn it, or we, grow up in an environment, in a household where there's a lot of shame, for anything you do wrong, right? When the reality is that great design, as we've already talked a little bit about, is an iterative process. Ostensibly, it's an iterative process of failure, right? Because you try a thing, it's not quite there. To that extent that it's not quite right, that's a failure. But failure is not a bad word. I mean, abject failure in the grand scheme, I don't know, maybe. But, iterative design, where you try a thing, try a thing, try a thing, every one of those, you try 100 things in 5 minutes, which is a lot of things. But every single one of those things could be deemed, hang on, I'm just adjusting something. Every one of those things could be deemed a failure, but every one of those was sort of an incremental step bumping you, you know, toward a destination that's going to be, that's going to be really good. So, but I think that the people who are just open, not knowing stuff, they're always open. When they're open to not knowing, they're open to learning, and then the learning leads you to knowing. And that's kind of the paradox. The person who can never admit it is really not open to learning, and not open to they have to know, which means they can never not know, but not knowing is the gateway to learning. That's what I'm trying to say. Kevin said the I don't know guys also include people that have a lack of confidence. It's likely where my concern stems. Fair enough. James, the I don't know guy comes to better solutions, even if it's in the long run, because he opens the door for other people to contribute, put their ideas forward. The know-it-all guy usually stifles the same kind of collaboration. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the Dunning-Kruger effect. You ought to drop a link. Drop a link on that if you would not mind, Wes, on the Dunning-Kruger effect. It has to do with the perception. I think you might. No, Kruger, I bet, is wrong. Dunning, I'm sure, is. I'm going to guess that Dunning is right and Kruger is wrong. Kevin, BYU speech that talks about people who mega inflate the room with their personality and knowledge. Love a link to that if you wouldn't mind dropping that for everybody. And Wes, if you wouldn't mind dropping a link on Dunning-Kruger or somebody. Yeah, the idea is that the less. Now, there's some interesting things about the empirical validity of Dunning-Kruger, which is a separate issue entirely. But the basic concept is just this idea that the less you know, that you tend to overinflate your abilities, your sense of ability, right? And the problem is, for you to know whether you're an expert, you have to know the field, including, you have to know sort of everything. In the perfect world, you'd know everything. Then you could base, offer an opinion about somebody else based upon how they compare to that set, you know. But when you don't actually possess the whole set, it's back to the orders of ignorance that we're going to talk about. You don't know what you don't know. So when you don't know what you don't know, it doesn't even exist. It's a space that doesn't exist. We're going to get back to Calvin. But you know what I mean? When you don't know what you don't know, you don't even know there's a space to consider in the equation of the ratio, you know what I mean, of what the thing is. So as a byproduct, because you don't know what you don't know, you think you know more than you do. When somebody who actually does know sees how much you don't know and can kind of maybe more accurately assess that. The problem is that the knowledge required to know whether you're an expert is in fact like in the ultimate sense, is the full knowledge of the entire field, of the entire space. So how do you reconcile all that? Because it's an evolutionary process, constantly growing, and the bottom line is the orders of ignorance, which we're going to talk about. Alex said the more you learn about a subject, the more you get an idea for how big the subject is. Yeah, that's right, and that's also going to show up in the orders of ignorance. Jansen, what'd you say, Jansen? If you can't explain it to a grade school, you don't know it well enough. I like that. Neil deGrasse Tyson from West. One of the great challenges in this world is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong. Yeah, that's right. That really does relate strongly to the Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay, so here's Calvin. I don't know if you can see this coming through the resolution either on YouTube or on Discord, but Calvin, here's kind of this uh-oh up here. Oh no, everything has suddenly turned neo-cubist. It all started when Calvin engaged his dad in a minor debate. Soon Calvin could see both sides of the issue. Then poor Calvin began to see both sides of everything. This is about this issue, and this is really relevant to 305G. But for those of you that had that from me, but it's still relevant to trying to understand design because it's that you've got to be able to embrace this process of failure. All right, so the traditional single viewpoint has been abandoned, perspective has been fractured, the multiple views provide too much information, it's impossible to move. Calvin quickly tries to eliminate all but one perspective. Then in this next to the last one, it works, the world falls into a recognizable order. And then the last one, you're still wrong, Dad. So this is a process that we all kind of go through when we are, you know, engaged in a process, a debate, an inquiry, a process of learning, whatever the case may be. And this is sort of, Bill Watterson trying to explore the sort of cognitive dissonance, the discomfort that we feel when we, you know, when we see another perspective and suddenly realize that there's more than one view of the world. Again, when you're talking about sort of bigger issues like we talk about in 305G, which is sort of the ethics stuff, uh, I think it's true even when it comes down to you're doing some design, you've got some use case design, you're doing some UML, you're building some code, you're doing code review. And it's really easy to get wrapped up in this world where you can't see your weak spots. You can't see what you don't know. And so it's just, it's easy to get really, really defensive. So let me kind of take it now to the orders of ignorance and try to walk through these and then maybe make some sense out of it. There are 5 orders of ignorance, and we're going to talk about 0 through 3. The 4th order ignorance is sort of meta level ignorance, which is an interesting idea. But 0th order ignorance, the idea with 0th order ignorance is that you know the question and you know the answer. This is the stuff that you not only know, but you know that you know it. It's a knowledge of the thing and a knowledge about knowing the thing. Okay. And what do you do? And the answer is, in school you look smart, you get a good grade, you pass the exam, you regurgitate, you do what school needs you to do. In a job, it means you do the thing you know how to do. You make the fries at McDonald's. You do the thing that you know how to do. So that's 0th order, provable knowledge, basically. Okay. So, and for every individual, this is going to be unique. There's everyone's got their own sort of working set of things they know. I'm ignoring for a second the things that is an entirely different class of question, which is the stuff that you think you know, but you actually don't. You're wrong, about what you thought you knew. That's another thing, but we're kind of ignoring that nuance for now. 1st order ignorance, I know the question, but I don't know the answer. Now, these could be really simple questions. They could be very big questions, okay? But in any case, you don't know the answer. It could be as simple as, I don't know, what's one of pick any one of you and, like, what's your middle name? I don't know. It could be something as dumb and trivial as that, or something as big as, what's the purpose of the universe? So the questions themselves can be great questions or trivial questions. But in any case, 1st order ignorance is to know the question and to know the answer. Okay. Sorry. is to know the question and to not know the answer. But you know that you don't know it, and that's the key, right? You're aware that that's a question, and you're also aware that you don't know the answer to it. Okay. And the task in that kind of an environment is to figure out the answer, right? That's kind of what you typically do with the orders of ignorance. And this last part is like, this is the part where this is the we're calling the I don't know guy. The I don't know person doesn't feel dumb or embarrassed, or if they do, they don't care because they're just willing. They'd rather know than not know, right? And so this is the part where we're tempted to feel dumb because we don't know the answer. But the reality is the recognition that there's a question and then the pursuit of an answer to that question is this sort of, path of wisdom, right? But the only way to enter upon that path of wisdom is the recognition that there is something you don't know. This is a recognition that there is something you don't know, okay? I talked about this kind of an interlude. I talked about the thrill of saying, the paradox of I don't know, right? The I don't know person is paradoxically probably the person who knows the very most. There is an idea that I want to throw out at you, which is that the realization that you're wrong is like the opening of a brand new vista. You've had this view that you thought was a sunset, but it was really a painting, butcher block paper, something, an approximation, but it wasn't the real thing. And one day, because you said, I don't know, you opened yourself up, the paper comes down, and you see a real sunset for a second. And, depending upon how good your butcher block paper artwork is and the quality of sunsets, in real life in your neighborhood, uh, it's thrilling. But if you had always just said, no, that's the real sunset, and then you just turn around and walk back into the house, always just staring at this big, bunch of paper that's just spread out there over your window or whatever. You know what I mean? That recognition that I held something to be wrong, I held something to be true, I'm sorry, and that I now recognize it was wrong. That's really the key. So there is this other idea, which is the sunk cost fallacy, which most of you probably know or are familiar with. The sunk cost fallacy basically just says that, because I put $1,000 into this investment, and it hasn't paid off, that has no bearing on the fact. In other words, the fact that you put $1,000 in already has no bearing per se on whether the next 1,000 is a good investment. But we do that a lot. Like, well, I'm already this far in, I'm going to try to see it to the end. And that's the sunk cost fallacy. It leads us, to hold on to something that we should let go of because we've invested so much in it. And, maybe it's not a good investment anymore and it's hard to walk away, right? So the idea is, it doesn't matter how long you've been wrong. When I was in my 30s, I had a conversation with an older gentleman who I now recognize in hindsight was probably younger than I am now, and at the time. And I don't remember what the exact topic was, but we were just, kind of in a friendly argument, just kind of, we disagreed on what something meant or whatever. And this was the 90s, mid to late 90s. So there was no real, the internet had sort of shown up, you know what I mean? But it wasn't an internet rich, the answers, on your phone. And interestingly, I had a significantly bigger library at my house on the subject than he did at his house, but we were at his house. So there was the resource material was hard to kind of come by. You know what I mean? The look it up sort of answers. But you also know that sometimes you'd look it up and it's not definitive, right? Anyway, I just still remember him, kind of like getting really, really defensive. Again, it's that Maybe that's that generational thing. And like shaking and saying to me, I have known this thing since you were in diapers, you know? And I said, me being me, I said, you realize, right, that the length of time that you've held something to be true has no bearing on whether it's actually true. You realize that, right? And then he got really pissed. And then I think we had to end the conversation soon thereafter because I think I was just being a smartass or just, which maybe I was, but, I was being disrespectful of my elders or something. I don't know exactly what. Um, but I think it's important. The length of time you've invested in an idea has no bearing on whether it's right or wrong. So, um, anyway, there was one other thing I wanted to say about this. I'm sure it'll come back. And it's not in the bullets right here. But this is just to reiterate this idea that learning and enlightenment happens on the frontier where ignorance lives. And if you're not okay going out to that, that brink of not knowing, the brink of ignorance, all of you being in school is, you step into a classroom, and every class you step into, unless it's something you just happen to be an expert at, every class you go into, is like, whoa, Calc 1, looks like I'm going to, and you're like, why am I here? Well, they make me, but it's an acknowledgement that I don't already know it, or I'd be, taking the test out exam or some, the challenge exam or what have you. Oh, I know what I was going to say. This is one other really, really important thing. So important, it's not on this slide. Here's the important thing. Think of all the things in your mind, in your heart that you sort of know. Could be trivial things like what's my name or whatever. What's my birthday? I don't know. What's my social security number? Yeah, I don't know. There's just factual things about yourself that you know, and things you know about other people, and you kind of like build. Eventually, if you look at everything that you hold to be true, it's a big list, right? I mean, it has to be thousands and thousands and thousands of things. Tens of thousands? Probably, you know? And every single thing, I mean, you think about it from just like a vocabulary perspective, every word you use is one you believe to be like, if you're speaking English, a word that's like legit to say in English. That's part of your belief system. It's not a big part, it may be a trivial part, but that's your belief system. Okay. So we have all these things that we believe to be true, but it's not possible that they're all correct. You with me on this? It is not possible that everything I believe to be true is actually true. It's not. So I have to know objectively that at least one, and probably more than one, of the things I hold to be true are in fact not true. So, great, right? No problem. Now, the big problem is which ones? As soon as I can figure out which ones are wrong, I can swap those out. So I'm in this constant process of swapping out the things that are, that are not true for the things that are more true, I hope, right? And it's obviously complex and subjective. There are things that obviously, I might swap out things that are true for things that are false and get it wrong. You know what I mean? So that's also, it's not like this monotonically non-decreasing function, where it only ever stays the same or goes up, you know. Let me see. Sorry, I was looking at Gunner's comment and I realized that I'd fallen behind a little bit on the comments. No, Gunner, I don't think that's the sunk cost fallacy unless you can give me some chapter and verse on that. Unless you were being clever. Gunner Speak for yourself, man. Were you just being funny about the Titan? Gunnar said the sunk cost fallacy. Just because the Titanic cost a lot doesn't mean it can't be sunk. Feels related. Feels related, but I'm still going to call it out and say I don't think that's the spirit of the full spirit anyway. Yeah. Okay. But you got it. Everything. So just think about that. Everything you think you know, you could be wrong. So think about this from like a design perspective. You go into a design review where you're going to walk into a room of people and they're going to review what you've designed, right? You've made some decisions. Do you have to be right? Is it okay if your design's not right? Does that shatter your self-image? You know what I mean? Okay, no, Gunnar, if you were being clever, I'm going to give you credit for being clever. So I'm going to give you credit for that. And someone gave you a medal, so that's nice. Yeah. Okay. But you know what I mean? You're going to do code review, right? I've seen design reviews where the goal when we're doing design and coding and building software is a kind of an egoless reaction. I'll sometimes call it egoless writing or egoless design. If I'm writing an essay or I'm writing a blog post, I'm writing a book, a chapter, whatever, I don't need to be right. I just want to get it right. I want it to be right when I'm done. Does that make sense? I want it to be right. That's my goal. So getting to right is my goal in the end. But the best way to get there is to be okay. I throw it out there and it's just like my best cut. Somebody else goes, oh, you know what else we could do with it? If you've ever, collaboratively written songs together or collaboratively done about anything, there's a process where the other person maybe just goes, hey, what about this? And it's better. Or what about that? No, I don't like it. And it's just back and forth process. But if you're all egotistically wrapped up in, no, it has to be my way, you may be, closing the door on opportunity to learn to be better. Seth, I don't know what you just said. I mean, no, wait, I know what you just said. I just don't know. You can be wrong at work, just not sick and wrong. You want to explain that? James, when I think of design, I don't think of it being right. Design constantly in a planning/creation phase. It requires iteration and evolution. Yeah, exactly. But like I said, how many of you have seen it? Have you seen, design review, code review, where someone's thrown something out, but now they're just married to it, and they can't see it any other way. Now that's not the same as seeing it and understanding the best you can, and then still coming back to that. Yeah, Mike's right. I'm being ruthless. I'm just tired, guys. I'm really sorry. Seth's not going to elaborate. That's fine. Heck with you, Seth. Um, wait. Okay, hang on. It just still doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry, Seth. It just is not working for me. But Mike can explain it. Okay. Let me see. Yeah, my old woodshop teacher would call bad ideas people are married to ugly babies. Yeah, well, someone's going to call your baby ugly. That's tough. But I've seen it. It's not an attractive look. Okay. Thanks, Wes, for um, being Seth's attorney on that one and representing him well. Okay, let me keep going. But here's the interesting thing: zeroth and first order ignorance. Nothing interesting really happens. These are just things you know. You know, but what you have to understand is basically nobody in your chosen career is paying you um, to do zeroth and first order ignorance problems. On the whole, there are exceptions. You know what I mean? If you're working at McDonald's and you're flipping burgers and you're making fries, you need to learn how to make those fries McDonald's way. And if you do that, you're going to make a perfect McDonald's French fry. I didn't say a perfect French fry. I said a perfect McDonald's French fry, and which is not a bad fry for about 90 seconds. If you can eat the entire thing in 90 seconds, those fries are not bad. Within about 2 minutes, they start to change, shape, consistency as they get colder. But you know what I'm saying? And it doesn't pay well. Why? Because there's not a lot of thinking required. You know, how do you move your way out of those kinds of jobs? Learn how to think. Learn how to do the kinds of things where somebody has to think and come to conclusions and decisions and discover and uncover information. And those are the jobs that we're trying to prepare you to do as software developers, right? Okay. So the second order of ignorance, you didn't even know it was a question. You didn't know the question, but you did have, sorry, I got behind on the comments again. Kevin said, very few cases where my way or the highway works or is appropriate. Agreed. In almost any environment, frankly. Okay, Seth, the reason you're laughing so hard outside of a train, at the train, is, and people think you're crazy, is because you are crazy, Seth. I just want you to understand that. Gunner's going for round 2 on trying to be clever. That's great. Mike's offended in Gunner's behalf. Let me see what else is going on. You guys are funny. Let me see. Sorry, I set you off. I set you off with the McDonald's. Oh, yeah, Seth, this is the best class ever. I agree. Okay, so this is the point. You don't know the question, but you have a framework for generating such questions. Okay? But this is that state of I don't know what I don't know, but I have a way of expanding my horizons constantly. So the really interesting question, the meta level big question is, where's that framework come from? Okay, that's the thing. Once you have that framework, you're in a position to ask the really interesting questions. But the framework doesn't just come for free. There are frameworks that we can go to school to acquire. We give you some framework, right? If you go to med school, I got a son in med school. I view med school as being essentially, a pre-packaged, massive, like really massive framework. And once you have that framework, you'll come into a situation and it equips you to ask interesting questions, right? Some of the questions are prefabbed as well. You actually know the question because it's part of the framework. But sometimes it allows you to stretch a little bit, couple some things in your head that you haven't seen coupled before. This was really the fundamental plot line of House MD, if anybody ever watched that. You know, in other words, House, played masterfully and annoyingly by Hugh Laurie, was, a doctor who would ask the questions that nobody else was asking. He was generating, his own frameworks from which his own unique and interesting questions would pop out and arise. That allowed him to save a bunch of lives while being obnoxious, kind of a Sherlock Holmes character, you know what I mean? Antisocial, but brilliant, but really, and Sherlock Holmes would do the same thing, right? Again, I know these are fictional characters, but you know what I'm trying to say. But I think that great scientists, great innovators, great developers, great thinkers are operating in this world of constantly generating frameworks that didn't exist before, of your own creation. One of the ways of generating a framework is to read a book that is unique and interesting and gives you a new way of thinking. One of the reasons that we have you take, let me give him a little rant about calculus, may I? I didn't really enjoy calculus when I had my 2 semesters, right? And a couple semesters of physics that relied on said calculus. And I had a calculus based stats class, that was a joy. So I didn't really, honestly, I didn't really enjoy any of these. I just kind of did them to get through my degree. But you realize that when people say, I've never used calculus, I had calculus, but I never used it, I'm kind of call bullcrap. Or I'm going to say, you're somebody that just absolutely cannot apply an abstraction from over here and use it over there. Because the reality is, and the reason, let's say, no, seeds, not true. You have used it in life. Using calculus, you said, I loved calculus. Have you had to use it in life? Using calculus doesn't mean figuring out the double integrals across polar coordinates for some whatever. That's not strict. Yes, that is a form of using calculus. It's not the only way to use calculus. Here's another one, algebra, right? You can be like, well, man, I did once have to run these numbers. Point is, algebra teaches you how to think abstractly, how to think of things as relationships conceptually without having to know what the numbers are. So it's variables, right? So if you've never, done an algebraic equation, but you've ever programmed, you've used algebra, right? I've known people who literally couldn't think conceptually, like, imagine that I made, twice as much as you made, and then, whatever, and they would be like, no, it doesn't work. Let's just say you make 50,000 and I make 25. Now they can math it through, but they couldn't abstract, Well, algebra teaches you the mental skill of how to abstract. Calculus teaches you a bunch of these. I'm going to give you my favorite one, and there's a bunch of them in calculus that use all the time, and that is the limit of a function, right? So Seth gets flashbacks. Yeah. No, let's take the limit of the function. The whole idea is you show me this function, and it goes joink, joink, right? But if you take the limit of the function as n gets really big, you find that it goes joink, joink, and then it takes off. Okay, good investment or a bad investment? You look at data right here. Is it a good investment or a bad investment? Well, what's the limit of the function as n approaches big? And there's that kind of an idea applies as far as thinking all the time. So the things that we teach you in a liberal arts education, as they call it traditionally, it's meant to give you a bunch of disparate frameworks, right? That you can kind of cobble together and feed together. And then as you read things, you read books, you educate yourself, you find that, I remember, talking about ideas or things, or, I don't even remember stuff that, we were patenting or one thing or another. And I remember, somebody just being like, so where does this come from? And I remember I had to cite 10 books. Well, from this book, we get this idea. From this other book, we get this other idea. That's where I got the idea. Now, those two things, when you put them together, makes a new framework ready to be joined with this other book, which when you connect these together, there's a new framework. The great innovation happens as new frameworks are created. Okay? So getting to second order ignorance, which I'm going to talk about third, but getting to second order ignorance from third is the quest of all creativity. Okay? And that's where the great companies come from. That's where the great products, the great ideas, the great discoveries, the great innovations, the great inventions, they come because a new framework was created. And from that framework, a million questions could be asked. Okay? But no, so Mr. Seeds, you said, never have I had to take an AP calculus test for a practical application. I think I know what you're trying to say. I just want to separate the abstract ideas, the conceptual ideas that we learn that can be applied to a lot of different situations. And there's a lot of that kind of thinking in calculus. Okay. Um, but it's still, but the bottom line is getting to second order ignorance is the journey. Okay. Now this was done by a student of mine a couple years ago. I edited it for public consumption because you know, and the only thing I don't like about this is the crap. The green slice is it's much smaller. If that's the universe of things, it's much smaller. But you got to show it. You got to represent it somehow. Stuff you don't know. Yeah, it's a big world, man. It's a big, big world, and it's also one of the yeah, Mike. Exactly. The green line's way too big. Uh, it's also one of the reasons that when you have time on your hands to do different things, to do hobbies. I know some of you code. It's what you love, and there's nothing wrong with this. And then coding's your hobby, and then on your own you do more coding, and then when you're tired of your hobby, you do more coding. The only problem with that is that the more things you're interested in, the more sort of framework things you can bring to bear. And when you're bringing multiple frameworks together, you're creating new frameworks from which the great ideas emerge. Okay. Okay. Let me keep going. And then this just gets us to third order ignorance. Yeah, Dallin. So depth versus breadth of education. Yeah, I think so. And also remember that education isn't just classes you take that you pay tuition for. I've had classes I've taught at the university that I never took a class. Yeah, I'm teaching pulling a class together. I remember pulling together a class on wireless data communications, right, at the Y. And I had had I think one or two graduate courses on networking, but classes on networking hadn't existed when I was an undergrad. You know what I mean? So, and I'd never had a class on wireless data communications, but I had created classes on like infrared and Bluetooth data communications. So, in other words, you can learn. So that sort of how do you transition from third to second? I think that it's an open mind. Starts with the Calvin and Hobbes. It starts with that sort of recognition of this openness to learning, this openness to not knowing stuff. You know. Um, and the journey is constantly to live in third order ignorance. That's the frontier of ignorance in a meta level way. I don't even have a framework. I don't have the questions. I don't know the questions. I don't even have a way to figure out what they are. So what I got to try to do is figure out a framework that's going to help me generate the interesting questions. So this is kind of a summary that just outlines the orders of ignorance. And whether I have the notion of, do I have an answer, do I have a question, do I have a framework, and you can kind of see the interesting transitions, right? And by the way, I want to just be really clear. It's not like you know you're a one or you're a two or you're a three or you're a zero. It's not like a per person ranking. It's times 1,000 things, with respect to you know personal information, right? We talked about my name, my middle name, um, you know, whatever. There are things that we think we know that we don't actually know, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, so it's about all, it's like 1,000 different instances or 10,000 different areas in which we have these, framework or no framework. All right. Let me give you one example as well, and let me see. Yeah, uh, this was a true story. Some of you have heard it, but um, so James asks, is there a difference between a framework and a pattern? Ooh, ooh, ooh. But see, right? I want to just point out what James is doing here. We talked about patterns, Alexander, and all of that. as at an introductory level. Um, and now I'm talking about orders of ignorance, and you're trying to see, do they synthesize? Can I staple them together, or do they somehow latch together to make a new thing, right? So kudos to James. I think that's what you're doing there in asking that question. And the other thing that you can always tell you've got a great question, and as you're navigating the orders of ignorance, you can tell if you've got a great question when it just makes you you just grind down to it, like immediately going, and sometimes you'll even stop and just go, well, that's a really good question. Good questions, our brain loves good questions. When we talked about Gestalt, our brain loves good questions because it wants to solve the puzzles constantly, you know? So, um, so Kevin just asks, isn't a framework in this case like the fuzzy notion that the question and answer even exist? I think so at some level, Kevin, but I also think that it's also, yeah, it's more like the creation that gives birth to the questions, even if you can't even conceptualize the answers yet. It's like an entirely new space. So here's an example. I'm at this dinner for new faculty 20, 21 years ago, long time ago, at BYU. It was a dinner, and there was a guy, and he was a professor in the accounting department. And BYU had at the time, I think they still do, like a top 3 accountancy program. So good on you. And he was talking about how he was, sharing with family about, going to be a faculty member. And they're like, yeah, you're going to teach. And he's like, well, I told him, it's more than just teaching. And they're like, what? Because again, when you're a student, you only really see professors teaching. You don't see them researching, on balance. In fact, you don't see a big chunk of what professors do. And so, and he said, well, it's like my brother-in-law is like, what? What do you do besides teach? And he's like, well, we do research. And then he's like, my brother-in-law just goes, what do you research in accounting? And then Mr. Junior Accounting Prof just goes, can you believe that? Can you believe that? And he starts doing the, and I'm sitting there going, like, what? But I didn't say it, but I was thinking, what do you do for research in accounting? Right? But you understand that my question, what do you do for research in accounting, is simply an indication of my ignorance about accounting, right? If I knew much, and I don't, but if I knew much about accounting and the field of accounting and what a professor in accounting does and the journals in accounting, the what the professional field deals with, what are the problems? It's not like they solved all the problems. I don't know what they are, right? Because those would be questions like, how do you solve this one problem? Or frameworks like, there exists this problem. And then you can start generating the interesting questions like, well, what would happen if we did this? Or what would happen? Or how important is the problem? Or, you know what I mean? It's a little fluid, but you've got to be comfortable sort of, navigating at that conceptual level. Okay. But yeah, so the bottom line is, so that was 21 years ago. I still don't know what they do for research and accounting. And do you know why? Because I don't care. I really don't care. I mean that in a big way. I really don't care what the research questions in accounting are, but I trust that they are. And there's a number of ways I could build a framework, like maybe start taking accounting classes, go get an accounting degree, go work as an accountant, read accounting journals, go talk to a professor and just say, hey, what are the interesting questions that you folks deal with, right? See what I mean? It's that journey. So here's the part where, this is that reminder that very little of interest happens at first and zeroth and first. If you're in a software world and you're still in that world, you're flipping software patties. Okay, that's what I call it. When you're basically working at McDonald's, there's just a compiler involved. You're flipping software patterns. You're told what to do, and you do it, and you got very few questions like, what's the syntax for this one thing? And it's not that interesting. Sometimes I call that, going back to my farm days growing up in Iowa, I sometimes call it shoveling bit. Same idea, right? So all the cool contributions happen here where I construct a framework from which all the other stuff emerges. And then I'm gonna go to that right there, and I'm gonna double back uh, on just some of the comments. So Landon said, I see a framework as a loose collection of knowledge potentially related to constructing a new question that we don't understand. Yeah, I think it can be. This is why understanding something can cause us to lose the ability to teach a subject to someone who doesn't know it already. And that's also something we call the curse of knowledge. Okay, that's the curse of knowledge. We can't separate ourselves from what we already know. And it's I think what makes, going on a limb here since I'm a teacher, but I think what one of the things that makes a great teacher, especially this class isn't real. I'm not really teaching. We're just talking. You know what I mean? But when I think about maybe like 2810, some of you had 2810 from me. That's, you got some factoids you need to cram into your head. The only way to be really effective when you're teaching that kind of stuff, you're teaching college algebra or calculus or whatever, is that you can somehow still connect to the you that didn't understand it and had to come to it, so you can teach it in a way that brings people along. And my experience, I think my theory is that the most brilliant people who wind up in academia, I'm not saying, don't misunderstand me, of the people who wind up in academia, those that were most brilliant, that never had to struggle to understand it, are often the most difficult teachers, because they can't break it down to what you actually need, because they never went through that process. They never even heard that song. And I feel like if I have a strength in teaching like 2810 and those kind of classes, it's that I always had to sort of construct it from scratch. And then those sort of scratch building blocks sort of stayed with me. So when I go to teach it, I go back to the building blocks, you know, not trying to toot my horn, but I think I do okay. But I think it's because I wasn't, I feel like I was okay, but I didn't, you know what I mean? I didn't feel like it was instantaneously just known to me. I always had to understand it from first principles and sort of derive it, you know? And I think that makes it a little easier to communicate that in a way that for somebody who doesn't already know it. Geek Muffin, I understand a framework is sort of a body or network of knowledge. Like if you're sort of involved with CS, you probably know what Stack Overflow is or know people. Yeah, I think that's part of it. It's part of it. And I apologize, I don't have a neat. I also think that frameworks are a little bit individual, but you know that you've been acquiring them when you pop out interesting questions, and when you're not afraid, when the answer to a question is another question, you're not afraid of that. You're not embarrassed by that. Okay. Um, so Dallin said, concrete examples help me understand the problem/question. I agree, Dallin. I also think, though, that there's an exercise in the conceptual manipulation. Without going to the concrete, there's a skill there that I would just encourage everybody to grow that skill. Gunnar, did you actually look up? Oh, from Wikipedia. I still don't care, Gunnar. I approve of the medal you received for that one, though. Yeah. No, but thanks for cranking that up. Um, Dallin said a lot of frameworks seem to come into existence out of annoyance or the desire to be lazy. Eventually, someone gets fed up with doing something a certain way, so they try to see if there's a shortcut or an easier way and then find one. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's true of a lot. Percentage, I have no idea, right? Geek Muffin still doesn't. Oh, yeah, I still don't understand. I'm right with you on that one. I still don't understand academic research in accounting. Um, Dallin, might be accounting researchers. How do we do accounting? Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the first question is really, what are the problems? So back up. So Dallin, the, the accounting research is how do we do accounting better? Okay, to which I'm going to ask a question. What do you mean by that? Right? So that's a question that induces an exploration, you know? And what do I mean by that is a big one. What do you mean by that? There's a lot of miscommunication in the workforce and design when you think I know what I'm trying to say and I go, what do you mean by that? Um, and then you're like, we realize we think different things. Um, yeah, Landon, good teachers sympathize with the framework that the student's working with. Yeah. Um, I think, Dallin, I'm going to call you out. Wikipedia wording is horrible for understanding. I think it's an overstatement that may or may not be defensible. It might be, but it might not be. But I think it's probably an overstatement. Oh, curse of knowledge. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin, for dropping the curse of knowledge. Um, Gunner is still trying to suck up from with having taken 28. Sorry, Gunner, man. No, thank you. Thank you, Gunner. You were a great student. I remember. I remember you. And that must have been that spring break when COVID slapped us and ruined our freaking lives. Um, Let me see. Yeah, what even is accounting? I don't even know. Um, okay. Hey, I want to do. We've got 2 minutes. I just want to say, where is it? This is my personal copy of A Pattern Language by our buddy Christopher Alexander and a bunch of other people. Um, I wanted to. There's an assignment I can't remember. I've had a handful of things just slapping me hard, so I haven't. Gunnar, did you just give yourself a medal? That is so awesome. I love all you guys. You know that you're just great. You're just fantastic. What I wanted to do, there is an assignment coming up where I'm asking you, and I can't remember if it's coming up now or later. But golly, I could look. How could I possibly know? I have an idea. Let me look it up. Come on. Okay. Yeah, okay. So I'm calling them the small projects. Yeah, okay. All right. So due at the end of this week is small project 3, identifying a pattern of your own. All you have to do is like identify it, talk about it, you know. But then the following week, so we'll have time next week to talk about this a little bit more. I just wanted to point you in case you're getting ahead. Ha ha, if you're ahead of the curve. Um, but I put up on, I think I put it in the description of the assignment. Actually, I think I put a link to it. No, I didn't. I didn't. So in that assignment on project 3, you identify like what I think the pattern would be, a little bit about it. Then I want you to like flesh it out, write it, and that's what 4 is. And with 4, I say following either Coplein's outline or Alexander's approach, and Alexander's approach being the way they do the patterns in this book. And in order to make that make sense, I actually scanned a chapter, a pattern. I can't. Of course, I can't find it. Um, I mean, I can find it. It's just not immediately falling out. It doesn't matter anyway. But I scanned like one of the patterns, just like the 5 pages that define the pattern. So, and what I want you to do when it comes time to do that is to read that pattern in Alexander's style. And then Coplein has like in that Coplein novella that you're supposed to read, like 60 pages. He goes into here's the sections and things like that. So it's sort of like saying, I don't care if you do Copeland style patterns or if you do Alexander style patterns, one may just sort of, speak to you better, and it doesn't much matter to me. But there is that scanned is up on Canvas in the files, but I'll link to it from the assignment as well. Okay, we're out of time. We're over time by a minute. All righty, thanks everybody. Great comments, really great comments. All those that tried to be clever, like to thanks for trying. Come back again next week and try some more. Yeah, William, will we do more with your pattern? No, not that one. That's more just, and it can be like a real life pattern, not a code pattern. So it is just an exercise to sort of get your thinking to that point, and then we're not going to, carry that. You don't have to go like implement it or whatever. And the Goff patterns are kind of practice, but I want you to internalize a little bit more what it would have been like to maybe create those patterns. Okay, I'm out.